Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, in which we bring you a daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today we'll be giving you highlights of a big meeting in Washington where congressmen and women met with key Sikh leaders to discuss the big issues that we cover regularly. As the one-year anniversary of the martyrdom of Hardeep Singh Nijjar passes, we also discuss the aftermath. And we also take a quick look at the events in London over the weekend commemorating 1984. Well, joining me for Perspectives, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada for Satellite TV News, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to all the viewers out there. Thanks for joining us today.
And as always, together, we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. We will, as usual, take a look at your comments, and of course we'll be continuing our day-by-day look back 40 years ago to those events of 1984. So do stay tuned for that. In the meantime, sit back, relax, and to kick us off once again, what have you got for us, James?
As most people are well aware, we are reaching the one-year anniversary of the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar at the Surrey Gurdwara in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. A lot has happened over the past year since that event transpired. There have been 4 arrests in the case, in addition to potential links to the India government. There's been a lot of discussion between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Modi of the Indian government in relation to the investigation. The talks led to the withdrawal of some discussion on trade and other investment opportunities going both ways from Canada to India and vice versa. There's been a lot of call internationally in terms of the extrajudicial killings, the possible involvement of the India government in the assassination or attempted assassinations of others in the US and the UK. So a lot has gone on. But most importantly, what's happening over the past week is that there are martyrdom events being held throughout the city of Surrey at various Sikh locations. And that is wound up starting on Sunday with a prayer vigil that will continue until later today. And today, of course, again, marking the one-year anniversary. The courts in Canada do not move at a super fast speed. And at this time, of course, the 4 accused are going to be going through a trial here in Surrey, British Columbia. The court system, as I stated, does not move at a rapid pace in Canada, but it will be fair and it will be unbiased by politics and by outside influences. At this time, of course, Mr. Gupta has also been captured overseas and has touched down in the US, as Angus touched on with our show yesterday. And again, all of these things are tied together, and it really seemed to kick off on the international demand for transparency, for respect of rule of law, and many other changes that are being demanded of from worldwide politicians as a result of Mr. Nijjar's death. Once again, they have been holding vigil and prayers going from Sunday, and they will wrap up later today. Our thoughts and our prayers are with Mr. Nijjar's family, his friends, and the entire community that's been impacted by this. And within the community, it's not just the Sikh community, but it's the entire community throughout the city of Surrey, throughout the province of British Columbia, and across Canada. And in that, I would like to invite you to make sure that when you leave your comments on our section below, that you're welcome to share thoughts and memories of Mr. Nijjar or other people that have influenced you in the Sikh community, because we know that there are many, such as himself, that were giving of themselves to make the communities and our lives better for everyone, not just of the Sikh background. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm going to pass that back to you, Angus.
Yeah, these terrible events actually have had a positive impact in many ways, because it's opened this conversation. It's actually highlighted many things that have been beneath the surface for quite some time. The martyrdom of Nijjar, the potential assassination of Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon, the potential martyrdom of Avtar Singh Kandar, it's raised awareness of what is going on with the Sikh community and the Indian government. It's allowed these conversations to come into the mainstream. People are now waking up to what's been going on. So these deaths have actually had an important impact on the public conversation and on the media coverage, which is in many ways a very good thing. The big question, it's handed the ball very much into the hands of the governments who now have to react to these events. And people are crying out, these are attacks on our sovereign territory. What are you going to do about it? And that, of course, does put them in the corner, because the governments now have to decide, do dollars, trade deals, trump human rights? And that's the big question that remains unanswered. Yeah, there's a lot of diplomatic language going on. What really matters is what's going on behind the scenes. How much pressure is Trudeau, Biden, Sunak? How much pressure are these leaders putting on India? Time will tell, James.
That it will, that it will.
Okay, we'll quickly move on to...
What have you got for us, Angus?
Yeah, our next story. There was a very important meeting that took place at the end of last week. This was the American Sikh Caucus Committee. And they held their interfaith prayer service for global peace last Thursday. This was a gathering of key characters, key high-profile Sikhs in the US, but also an assembly of very high-profile US congressmen and congresswomen who got together, and it was a long meeting. It was 2 or 3 hours, and they discussed many of these issues that we obviously cover on a daily basis. But again, it just highlights how mainstream these issues are becoming, because it's now being discussed openly within the US government, and of course with their collaboration with Sikh leaders and Sikh organisations to highlight these events. Let me just show you, it was a long meeting. I have trawled through this meeting and come up with some key highlights, but let me just share this with you, and I'll play this, a couple of minutes of the key highlights for you.
As we mark 40 years since the atrocious assault on the Golden Temple, we are making clear that Congress's support of this community remains unwavering and bipartisan. The American experiment is built on a premise of religious freedom. The enemies of religious freedom are no longer constrained by national borders. The campaign to silence and terrorize this community is not a regional problem. These assaults on political opposition are not contained to any one country. This is a global threat.
That was Congresswoman Catherine Clark, and again, a very senior congresswoman, a very well-respected lady, talking about the big issues of transnational repression and, of course, the US response to it. The next speaker, this was actually the host of the caucus, and he talked about many elements, but this was an interesting comment that he made relating to the Sikh genocide.
So we are here today to remember all those, because one atrocity adds into another. If the world doesn't recognize atrocity against one community, then other atrocities happen. I trust Madam Under Secretary General. If the UN at the time would have recognized Sikh genocide in 1984 or 1995, we wouldn't have a Srebrenica. We wouldn't have a genocide of Muslims in Serbia.
What a big point. We don't hear this often enough. The Sikh genocide that happened in 1984, or genocides plural, if they'd been recognised at the time by the United Nations, by the international community, and recognised as a genocide, it might have stopped all these other genocides that's happened ever since. James, that's a big point.
A very good point, Angus, that without the action taking place back then, all of these thousands of lives that have been lost in other genocides have been allowed to happen, and it could have made such a change in history, moving forward. So it just shows that when we fail to act as a world and coming together as a human race, it just continues.
Yeah. Well, the next speaker is a very well-known lady, Dr. Jasmeet Kaur Bains. She was the first ever Sikh member in the California State Assembly, and she made waves because she successfully introduced the resolution to recognise the Sikh genocide in California. Let's see what she had to say at the meeting.
Today on the floor, I introduced a resolution for the 1986 events of Saka Nakodar, recognizing the Indian Army coming in and annihilating 4 young men for protecting and standing up for their right to freedoms and speech and freedom of religion. This year marks the 40th anniversary It has been 40 years, but we have not forgotten. The events of 1984 were, in fact, a genocide. This was not a program. This was not a riot. This was, in fact, a genocide. And I urge Congress to also pass a resolution recognizing that 1984 was, in fact, an attempted genocide of the Sikh community.
Powerful words, but I want to pick up something that she mentioned at the beginning. This is the 1986 Sakha, and this is something I actually didn't know much about, and I've had to look this up, but I want to tell our audience a bit more about this for those who might not be aware of what actually happened. This is only just 2 years after 1984, the genocides of 1984. In 1986, Ravinder Singh, Baldev Singh, Multani, Jilman Singh and Harmandir Singh, along with several hundred others, had gathered in Nakoda, Punjab, to protest the desecration of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, the sacred scriptures of the Sikhs, and collect the burnt remains for disposal according to Sikh religious rites. Now, without warning, the security forces opened fire on this procession. They killed Ravinder Singh, Baldev Singh and Jilman Singh in the initial firing. They chased down Harmandir Singh, they drew him out from where he'd taken shelter, and they shot him at close range. The security forces took the bodies to the civil hospital in Nakoda for post-mortem, and when the doctors informed them that Harmandir Singh was still alive, they removed him and they subsequently executed him. And Ravinder Singh's father, Baldev Singh, identified the bodies at the civil hospital, and when the families went to the hospital to collect the bodies, the security forces prevented them from claiming them and secretly cremated them. Again, this is only 2 years after 1984, and still this dreadful persecution, this illegal behaviour from the state carries on. So anyway, the next speaker which I wanted to highlight, this is Congresswoman Judy Chu. She founded this meeting, the Sikh Caucus, to celebrate what she called were the great accomplishments of Sikh Americans. And she brought up some key points which highlighted include religiously motivated hate crimes. And the statistics that she brought up, they are at the moment the highest since 2001. There's been an increase of 17% since 2001, and Sikhs are the second most targeted group for hate crimes. She also talked about transnational repression, but she did say that the US will not tolerate this political violence. And they said there are actions meant to intimidate Sikhs within the diaspora, not just the US diaspora, but the global diaspora. So this is a US congressman publicly highlighting on TV, on video, all these key factors that are affecting the Sikh community. And this just once again is demonstrating how this lobbying, this powerful lobbying by Sikh organisations is having this positive effect on public discourse. Now, congressmen and congresswomen are discussing it at these big meetings. James.
Very good point, and it's something that we haven't looked at in terms of Canadians. We didn't want to accept that it could happen in our country, and of course, Mr. Nijjar put a face to it here and really drove home the impact that the international actions of others are having on our soil as well as the global community.
Yeah, so big news and very encouraging news. So I just wanted to quickly mention, this week I will be interviewing on a podcast a gentleman called Dabinderjit Singh. He is one of the co-authors of the Sikh Manifesto, but he's also a very high-profile campaigner here in the UK. And he attended a huge rally in London over the weekend commemorating 1984. And I do urge the audience to stay tuned this week and watch the interview that we'll be doing over the next couple of days, because we'll be taking a look at what he talked about, but also some very important messages contained within the Sikh Manifesto that don't just represent British Sikhs who are lobbying the UK government, but these same issues are totally relevant to the US and Canadian Sikhs across the entire diaspora. And it's such a powerful tool for these communities to lobby their respective governments. So yeah, we'll be talking to Dabinderjit tomorrow.
Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh. Das khema chaਹੁੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੋਲਣਾ ਕੁਝ ਇੱਥੇ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਵੀ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਸੁਨੇਹੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣੇ 40 years ago Sikhs in this country experienced transnational repression. This is not an event that started with Avtar Singh Khanda, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, or the plots in America. The first demonstration in London was on the 10th of June 1984, and the Indian High Commissioner in London on the 7th of June 1984 went to the Home Office, and he said to Douglas Hurd, we have this in black and white, can you stop their protest on the 10th of June 1984?
And as you can see, the pictures here we'll also take a quick look at those huge crowds that gathered in Trafalgar Square in London, which is very encouraging. Okay, so for our next section, we'll just take a quick look at some of your comments. And the first one we'll pick up is from one of our earlier shows. This is from Harnak Singh Khalsa, 6105. Regarding the last slide, Battle of Amritsar. Was it a battle? Wow, yeah, this is important terminology. A battle is usually between two parties where there is some degree of comparable strength, not when the armed forces of a nation with all their might pounce upon a small group to subjugate them. We should present reality to the listener. Possibly the assault of Amritsar is more appropriate. It's all about terminology. And you're right, this is a very good point, and I think it should be labelled for what it was. It wasn't even just an assault. It was a massacre. It was cold-blooded murder. It was a genocide. And the Sikh lobby that are pushing for this terminology to recognise the Sikh genocides of 1984, it's important because the word genocide has huge connotations. It implies so much. It says in that single word so much. And you're right, if we just call it the Battle of Amritsar, it implies it was some sort of equal battle. It wasn't. It was over 1,000 Indian troops tackling just a very small number of brave, armed, heroic Sikhs just standing up for their own human rights. Right. So, yeah, it wasn't a battle, was it, James?
No, not at all. And Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the federal NDP party in Canada, is actually trying to push for Canada to officially recognize it as a genocide as well.
Yeah, and there are US states now who are one by one, I think we're up to 3 states now in the US that have now officially labelled it as a Sikh genocide. And likewise here in the UK, Devinderjit Singh is leading the charge to get it recognised by the UK government as an official genocide. The second comment, which I wanted to raise. So, yeah, I know it's a comment. I wanted to raise this because this does bring up a couple of things. SSK Trucking said, audio quality sahi nahi ji. Now, I don't speak Punjabi, but I think the message was very clear. Yeah, this related to one of our earlier shows where we did have a few audio issues. I did want to raise this just to highlight the fact that, yes, things are improving. It's a new show. It does involve a lot of technical jiggery-pokery, and we're still finding our way, but we're getting there. We're building new studios. So as time goes by, and hopefully if you can tell more of your friends to keep watching the show, we build up our audience, it does help us build the show into a technically more appropriate show. But we're getting there, we are getting there. And it was this comment from M. Goodengaman who said, need cleaning earlugs, which made me laugh. James, I don't know if you have the same slang in Canada, earlugs for ears.
I was going to say, I don't even know what that is.
Well, it reminds me, many years ago, I was in the British Army, and for my medical, for the Parachute Regiment medical, I had a wonderful Indian doctor who told me to approach him, and he said, I want to examine your luggles. And I said, you want to examine my what? And he said, your luggles, lug holes, which is British slang, which this wonderful Indian gentleman had learned as part of his English learning. Luggles, meaning lug holes, earlugs, meaning ears. So there you go.
That's funny. There we go.
Right, let's get serious again. And once again, we're going to take a look at our day-by-day look back at the terrible events of 1984. As always, I want to credit the National Sikh Youth Federation for their narrative, discussing and detailing what happened on those days. Today, we're going to take a look at the 7th of June, 1984. So I'll paraphrase some of the narrative of what happened on that terrible day. So by the morning of June the 7th, except for a very few surviving snipers, the men who had held the army at bay for 3 days were all dead. The majority of the complex was under army control. The aftermath of the battle was horrific and ghastly. A teenage girl eyewitness details how the army had treated the pilgrims who'd survived the bombardment. She said, "The army took off their turbans, with which they tied their hands behind their backs. Then the army men beat these Sikh boys with the butts of their rifles until they fell on the ground and were shot dead right in front of me. Then the Sikh reference library was torched. The Sikh fighters had fought to protect their most valuable shrine from harm and the pilgrims from dishonour and death. But sadly, after the resistance was broken, the army had free rein. Apart from the rape and murder of pilgrims, the most distressing and inexcusable act was the torching of the Sikh reference library." And as British journalist Mark Tully wrote, "Any army which wants to destroy a nation destroys its culture. That is why the Indian Army burnt the Sikh reference library." Gianni Kirpal Singh, Jatadar of the Akal Takht at the time of Operation Blue Star and an eyewitness, he said that the government wanted to destroy Sikh history. Otherwise, how do you explain the fire in the Sikh reference library? The archives were set on fire 2 days after the army action. It was a historical collection of ancient books, khadas, they're the manuscripts, handwritten historical burs, they're Guru Granth Sahibs. Some of them were even written by the gurus themselves, Janam Sakhi's biographical sketches of gurus. Hukam Namaz, there were the commandments of the Akal Takht, which were of the greatest importance as the Sikhs regularly referred to them for their research. And then, to add insult to the slaughter, the soldiers celebrated by drinking and smoking in the Sikhs' holy shrine. Although the Sri Harmandir Sahib was riddled with bullets, the Akal Takht destroyed with cannon fire and thousands of pilgrims massacred, the army was celebrating. People were seen carrying buckets of beer to the main gates of the temple, where they jubilantly served the soldiers. The soldiers freely drank and smoked inside the complex. They certainly had plenty to drink. A notification of the government of Punjab's Department of Excise and Taxation allowed for the provision of, wait for it, 700,000 quart bottles of rum, 30,000 quart bottles of whiskey, 60,000 quart bottles of brandy and 160,000 bottles of beer, all for consumption by the armed forces deployed in Operation Blue Star. So, James, the blood is still running in the cobbles of Akal Takht, and the soldiers who did that massacre are sitting there getting drunk, celebrating.
Just atrocious to think about all of the innocent lives lost there, and they're out there partying like they've done some great deed. Just disgusting.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that quote there from one of the eyewitnesses saying, "To destroy a nation, you destroy their culture." And how does that reflect now in modern Punjab, where this very same policy 40 years later is effectively being used to destroy Sikh culture? They want to destroy the Sikh nation, Khalistan, by destroying its culture. They are destroying its language. They're making sure that the Punjabi language, that Punjabi culture is driven out. Very, very sad indeed. But there we must leave it for today. And you've been watching Perspectives. Don't forget you can message us below, or of course to our email, that's message@satlechtv.com, on any news items that you think we should be talking about, and we do like to hear from you. But in the meantime, thank you for watching Perspectives. It is goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to spread the word. More people that can watch, also more people that can comment to us and make the show better.
You've been watching Perspectives. We'll see you next time.